A woman's laughter. At first, it feels like sunshine, soft and affirming, cascading through your chest. You bask in it, mistaking it for approval, for safety. But then, almost without warning, that same laughter turns, sharpens, and suddenly you are no longer basking in its warmth. You are drowning in its judgment. One shift of tone, one subtle gesture, and the ground beneath your feet dissolves. You feel foolish, exposed, disarmed. And in that very instant, you have been broken, not by a blow, not by rejection, but by the invisible frame she has set around you. Men stumble here, again and again, not realizing that what defeats them is not what she says, but the unseen architecture of perception she establishes. This is the frame game. The trap Machiavelli himself would recognize as the most insidious of all, because the battlefield is not the body, nor the heart, but the mind. You are not attacked. You are reframed. And unless you learn this law, you will live enslaved by a power you cannot name. But if you master it, if you seize control of the frame, you will wield a weapon sharper than any sword. This is the thesis. She does not destroy you with rejection. She destroys you by defining the terms of your own identity, and Machiavelli left us the map to reverse it. Machiavelli understood with brutal clarity that power is not about force, but about perception. In his world of princes and courtiers, the game was never about what was real. It was about what appeared to be real. A ruler could be merciful or cruel, but what mattered was not the action itself. It was how the action was framed in the minds of the people. If mercy appeared as weakness, it was deadly. If cruelty appeared as strength, it was necessary. And so it is with women. She does not conquer you through strength. She conquers you by convincing you to see her actions through her lens. She sets the frame. She names the roles. She tilts the board before the game even begins. And the man who does not see this, the man who plays only inside the frame she has drawn, is already broken. Consider the metaphor of the stage. A woman invites you onto it, but it is her stage, her lighting, her script. You think you are improvising, but every word you utter only reinforces the role she cast you in from the beginning. She sighs when you chase her, and suddenly you are needy. She pulls back and watches how you react, and suddenly you are unstable. She raises her voice, and you lower yours, and suddenly you are submissive. Do you see? She is not reacting to you. She is assigning meaning to your every gesture. And because you do not see the hidden hand of framing, you accept her definitions as truth. This is why you feel powerless, why you feel confused, why you walk away from encounters with women asking yourself, "What just happened to me?" You did not lose a conversation. You lost control of the frame. Machiavelli's timeless revelation is that men who rule must master appearances, because appearances are more durable than truth. He wrote that men are simple and moved more by what they see and hear than by what is hidden. If that is true of nations, how much more true is it of relationships? A woman who controls the frame controls the theater of meaning. She does not need to be stronger than you. She does not need to defeat you in open combat. She only needs to define the terms of victory in a way that ensures you cannot win. And you, blinded by your own craving for approval, play the part she assigns. The tragedy is not that she manipulates. The tragedy is that you never realized you were in a frame game to begin with. But here lies the promise of transformation. Once you awaken to the game, once you understand that every interaction is a clash of frames, you can step onto the stage with your own lighting, your own script, your own rules. Machiavelli teaches us that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But the deeper truth is this: it is better to define the frame than to be trapped within it. The man who controls the frame controls the meaning of love, fear, and respect itself. And this is where the sovereign path begins. Because the question is no longer, does she like me? The question is, whose frame will define this reality? And if you hesitate to answer, you have already lost. She knows this, often without ever naming it. Women are masters of subtle cues, unspoken tones, invisible pressure. The slightest arch of an eyebrow, the calculated silence after your joke, the way she pulls her phone from her pocket as you speak, all of these are not accidents. They are moves within the frame game. Each one a message, each one a suggestion of status, each one pulling you closer to accepting her definitions of who you are in relation to her. You think you are simply conversing, but in truth, you are submitting. The tragedy is that you confuse compliance with connection. You confuse playing inside her frame with building intimacy. But intimacy cannot exist when one party defines the terms and the other unconsciously obeys. What exists instead is hierarchy, a hidden monarchy where she is the sovereign and you are the supplicant. Machiavelli would laugh at your naivety. He would say, "You are not courting her, you are bending to her principality." And here is the law. Perception is more powerful than truth. You may be strong, disciplined, capable, but if you allow her to frame you as weak, needy, unworthy, then in her eyes, and worse, in your own, you become exactly that. The man who fails to master frame becomes what the frame dictates. The frame is destiny. This is why men leave encounters with women feeling smaller, diminished, hollowed out. Not because she truly exposed them, but because they accepted the meaning she projected onto their behavior. A sigh becomes condemnation. A pause becomes rejection. A raised eyebrow becomes judgment. The man collapses, not under reality, but under perception. And perception is a kingdom ruled by whoever seizes it first. Machiavelli warned princes never to rely on the goodwill of others, for goodwill is fickle, fragile, shifting with the winds of fortune. Instead, he insisted that rulers must establish control over appearances, even if it required deception, even if it required cruelty. What matters is not the sincerity of virtue, but the perception of strength. And this is where men today falter. They chase goodwill from women, mistaking approval for security. They beg for validation, thinking it will lead to love. But love that arises from weakness is not love, it is pity. And pity corrodes desire until nothing remains but contempt. A man who orients his behavior inside the frame of her approval is not respected, even if he is momentarily tolerated. He has become predictable, malleable, disposable. And Machiavelli tells us plainly, such men cannot rule, and therefore cannot survive. The key is brutal but liberating. Never surrender the frame. Never allow her silence, her teasing, her withdrawal to define your reality. You must hold the frame as the sovereign holds the throne. It is not her role to decide if you are desirable. It is not her role to dictate the rhythm of pursuit. It is not her role to define what your gestures mean. That power belongs to you, if only you dare to seize it. And this is where most men recoil. They fear that to hold the frame is to be cruel, to be callous, to be heartless. But Machiavelli would scoff at this softness. He would remind us that cruelty used correctly can be more merciful than misplaced kindness. A frame that establishes strength and certainty creates clarity. A man who commands the frame is not cruel. He is sovereign. And sovereignty is the only soil where respect and desire can grow. But how do you embody this? By understanding that every reaction is a declaration of frame. When she pulls away, the weak man chases. His chasing declares, she holds the frame. When she mocks him, the weak man defends himself. His defense declares, she holds the frame. When she withholds, the weak man pleads. His pleading declares, she holds the frame. In every instance, the collapse is not in the action, but in the surrender of perception. The sovereign man does not chase. He does not plead. He does not explain. He reframes. He dictates. He remains unshaken, because his identity is not built on her approval, but on his sovereignty. And this, Machiavelli would say, is the heart of power, to appear immovable, inevitable, untouchable. Now we arrive at a dangerous revelation. If she can break you with the frame game, then what happens when you master it instead? What happens when you become the one who defines the meaning of every gesture, every pause, every moment of silence? The answer is unsettling. Because once you seize the frame, everything changes. Everything changes because the invisible battlefield tilts in your favor. Suddenly, her silence no longer suffocates you. It suffocates her. Where once her withdrawal filled you with doubt, now it reveals her investment. Where once her teasing felt like an attack, now it becomes a sign of her seeking your attention. You see, the same actions, the same words, the same gestures remain, but the meaning shifts entirely when you hold the frame. It is not the behavior itself that matters. It is the lens through which it is interpreted. That lens is the frame, and the frame belongs to whoever claims it with the greatest conviction. When she tests you with withdrawal, you no longer chase. You let her absence define her, not you. When she mocks, you do not defend, you laugh, and by laughing, you expose her attempt as trivial. When she delays, you move forward with or without her, and the delay becomes her loss, not yours. The frame is never neutral. It always belongs to someone, and the one who seizes it defines reality itself. Machiavelli would call this mastery of appearances. He would remind us that men are not bound by truth, but by perception. The sovereign man, like the sovereign prince, understands that reality bends toward the one who can define it with the greatest clarity and resolve. He does not waste time debating fairness or sincerity, because such words are irrelevant in the theater of power. He asks only, who controls the frame? Who dictates the meaning of this moment? And in relationships with women, this single question determines whether you are sovereign or supplicant, ruler or pawn. The weak man sees her pulling away and thinks, she is losing interest. The sovereign man sees the same act and declares, she is testing my gravity. One collapses. The other grows stronger. The event is the same. The frame defines the truth. This is why most men live in quiet confusion, never understanding why their strength in one domain of life evaporates in the presence of a woman. They can be disciplined at work, ruthless in business, unshaken among rivals. But with her, they become hesitant, submissive, fragile. It is not that they lack strength. It is that they surrender the frame. They do not realize that the same law Machiavelli taught for princes applies in love. Appearances are more powerful than reality, and whoever defines appearances commands the entire field. The man who yields the frame yields himself, no matter how accomplished he may be elsewhere. And so, he is broken, not because he was weak, but because he was blind. The awakening is harsh, but exhilarating. You begin to see every moment of tension with her as an opportunity to assert the frame. She questions you, and instead of defending, you redirect. She withdraws, and instead of chasing, you continue as though her absence changes nothing. She criticizes, and instead of collapsing, you amplify your stance, making it bolder. Each act is a declaration. I hold the frame. I dictate the meaning. I am sovereign here. And paradoxically, the more you do this, the more respect and desire she feels. For what she truly craves is not your submission to her definitions, but your ability to impose your own. A woman cannot desire a man who bends to her every gesture, for such a man is not a sovereign, but a subject. Desire is born only where sovereignty is undeniable. But let us confront the deeper, more unsettling layer. If you do not hold the frame, you will not merely lose her respect. You will lose yourself, because identity is forged in the frames you accept. When you allow her to define you as needy, you become needy. When you allow her to define you as unstable, you become unstable. When you allow her to define you as weak, you become weak. The collapse is not external, it is internal. And soon you do not merely play the role, she casts you inhabit it. Your very sense of self corrodes under the acid of her perception. Machiavelli warned that men who fail to control appearances are at the mercy of fortune. You are no different. A man who cannot seize the frame lives at the mercy of every woman he encounters. His identity shifts with her moods. His confidence rises and falls with her approval. He is not sovereign. He is subject. And there is no fate more humiliating. So the brutal truth is this: either you master the frame, or you will be mastered by it. And now comes the dangerous question. If the frame game is inevitable, if it defines every interaction, then what is the strategy of the sovereign man? How does he not merely resist her frames, but dominate them, bend them, weaponize them? The answer is darker and more liberating than you might expect. The sovereign man does not resist her frame. He annihilates it and replaces it with his own. Resistance itself is weakness, because resistance acknowledges her power to define the rules. The moment you defend, justify, explain, or counter-argue, you are still playing on her stage. Sovereignty is not reaction. Sovereignty is declaration. The sovereign man never asks, "How do I prove myself to her?" He asks, "How do I define the meaning of this moment so thoroughly that her only option is to either submit or leave?" That is the ruthlessness Machiavelli understood. Power is not negotiation. Power is the ability to impose perception so completely that alternative interpretations suffocate and die. This is why Machiavelli insisted it was better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Fear in this sense is not terror. It is recognition of gravity. It is the unspoken knowledge that your reality is the dominant one, that your frame is unshakable. Love can be given lightly, can be withdrawn, can be fickle. But fear the respect of gravity endures. Women test men relentlessly because they crave this gravity. They pull away not because they want you gone, but because they want to feel the pull of your sovereignty. They mock you not because they despise you, but because they want to know that your reality is stronger than their teasing. They withdraw affection not to abandon you, but to measure whether your frame collapses without it. Each of these is a Machiavellian test, designed to reveal whether you are sovereign or subject. And most men fail, not because the test is unfair, but because they do not realize they are being tested at all. So what is the strategy of sovereignty? First, indifference to her approval. This does not mean cruelty. It means your value is not contingent on her validation. When she withholds, you remain whole. When she doubts, you remain certain. When she criticizes, you remain grounded. This unshakable core is the foundation of the sovereign frame. Second, redefinition. Every gesture she makes, you define it on your terms. She mocks, you interpret it as attention. She withdraws, you interpret it as her need for reflection. She challenges, you interpret it as her desire for your strength. You are not deceiving yourself. You are dictating the meaning of the event. And third, escalation. The sovereign man does not merely hold the frame, he expands it. He leads conversations into new territories. He sets the rhythm of intimacy. He dictates the pace of escalation. He does not wait to see how she reacts. He acts, and her reaction becomes part of his frame. In this way, he is always ahead, always leading, always dictating. Machiavelli warned that fortune favors the bold, and fortune in love is no different. Women are not drawn to men who play it safe, who hesitate, who react. They are drawn to men who impose reality with conviction. The sovereign man understands this. Her attraction is not to his compliance, but to his defiance of her attempts to control him. She does not desire the man who bends to her moods, but the man whose sovereignty compels her to orbit around him. This is why a woman can fall for a man she once dismissed if he seizes the frame, and why she can lose all desire for a man she once adored if he surrenders it. Attraction itself is a byproduct of the frame game. Respect, intimacy, passion, they all grow only in the soil of sovereignty. But here is the final merciless revelation. The frame game never ends. It is not something you solve once and walk away victorious. It is a perpetual contest, a dance of power, a ceaseless test. Just as a prince must continually manage appearances to remain in power, so too must a man continually assert his sovereignty. The moment you relax, the moment you assume the game is over, is the moment she tests again. Not out of malice, but out of nature. For just as subjects will always probe the strength of their ruler, a woman will always probe the sovereignty of her man. And this is not a curse, but a gift. For it is in these constant tests that your sovereignty is sharpened, forged, proven. The sovereign man does not resent the frame game. He embraces it. He sees it as the crucible that keeps him awake, alert, unshakable. So the choice before you is brutal, but clear. You can live blind, forever broken by frames you do not see, forever asking yourself why she loses interest, why she pulls away, why she seems to control the rhythm of your very soul. Or you can awaken. You can seize the frame, define the meaning, dictate the reality. You can become sovereign. And once you do, you will never again be broken by a woman's laughter, her silence, or her withdrawal. For you will know what Machiavelli knew, that power does not belong to the one who plays fairly, but to the one who defines the game. And the only question that remains is this: will you continue to live inside her frame? Or will you become the man who bends reality itself? To bend reality itself is to step into the throne room of your own life, to declare that your identity is not a negotiation, but a decree. Most men never reach this point because they cannot stomach the responsibility. It is easier to blame her moods, her games, her cruelty. It is easier to lament that women are unfair, manipulative, impossible to please. But the truth Machiavelli exposes, and the truth most men cannot endure, is that the fault is not hers. It is yours. You were not defeated by her. You were defeated by your own failure to seize sovereignty. You were conquered not by her beauty, nor by her silence, but by your willingness to live inside the cage of her frame. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You realize that every failed relationship, every collapse of attraction, every moment of humiliation was not fate, it was surrender. Yet this realization, though brutal, is the seed of rebirth. Because if you surrendered, then you can reclaim. If you allowed her to define the frame, then you can redefine it. If you yielded your sovereignty, then you can seize it again. This is the paradox Machiavelli would whisper in your ear. The very pain of being broken is proof that you are capable of being sovereign. For only a sovereign can be overthrown. The slave has nothing to lose, because he never possessed the throne. If you have felt the sting of her disapproval carve into your chest, if you have felt the humiliation of her pulling away and leaving you desperate, then know this: you are not condemned, you are invited. Invited to reclaim what was always yours, the right to define reality. And how do you begin? You begin with silence. Not her silence, which once unmade you, but yours. The silence of restraint, of refusing to explain yourself, of refusing to collapse into justification. This is the first step of sovereignty, to realize that your presence does not require defense. Then you move to clarity. Clear statements of intent, not masked in apology, not softened by uncertainty. I will be here at this time. This is what I want. This is who I am. Not demands. Not pleas, declarations, each one a brick in the fortress of your frame. Finally, you embrace inevitability. You no longer wonder if she approves. You no longer question if she will stay. You no longer calculate how to keep her. You move forward as if your life is inevitable, as if your direction is undeniable. And in this inevitability, you become magnetic. For women do not crave men who beg for approval. They crave men who live as though approval is irrelevant. Machiavelli knew that rulers must project inevitability, because subjects rally around certainty and scatter from doubt. A prince who appears doomed invites betrayal. A prince who appears destined invites loyalty. So too with you. If you appear needy, uncertain, malleable, she withdraws. If you appear inevitable, sovereign, immovable, she invests. This is not manipulation. This is alignment with the ancient law of perception. You become the gravitational center, and she orbits you willingly, because the alternative is to drift in the chaos of her own emotions. She does not want to rule you. She wants to feel ruled by your gravity. But she will never admit this, and she will never stop testing for it, which means your sovereignty must be relentless. And here is the final warning. Sovereignty is not a moment. It is an identity. You cannot fake it for a week, a month, or even a year. If you do, she will eventually find the cracks and push until you crumble. Sovereignty must be total. It must be the foundation of how you see yourself, how you walk, how you speak, how you love. Anything less will collapse under the pressure of her frame games. And when it collapses, you will once again be broken. But if it endures, if you build it into the marrow of your being, then no test, no silence, no rejection can unmake you. You will have become what Machiavelli envisioned, a man who defines appearances so completely that even fortune itself bends to his will. So I ask you now, not as a suggestion, but as a summons, will you continue to live as the man who's broken by the frames of women, forever reactive, forever pleading, forever confused? Or will you rise as the sovereign man, the man who bends the frame, defines the meaning, and rules his reality with unshakable gravity? Because in the end, the woman does not break you. You break yourself by failing to seize sovereignty. And the man who understands this truth has already begun his transformation. Transformation begins the moment you stop asking, "What does she want from me?" and begin declaring, "This is what I am." That shift alone is seismic, because one question enslaves you, the other enthrones you. When you ask what she wants, you place her as judge, as sovereign, as the arbiter of your identity. But when you declare what you are, you dethrone her frame entirely and demand that she respond within yours. This is the architecture of sovereignty. Reality is not a mirror of her perception. It is the projection of yours, and only one can prevail. This is why Machiavelli's teaching is so merciless, and yet so liberating. He saw that men who rely on the mercy of others become slaves to fortune. They cling to the approval of the crowd, the validation of allies, the smiles of courtiers. And yet fortune is fickle. Allies are treacherous. Crowds are unstable. A ruler must never place his identity in their hands. He must seize the symbols of power, master the appearances, project inevitability. Replace the word prince with man. Replace the word people with woman, and the lesson remains unbroken across centuries. If you live for her approval, you will be broken by her disapproval. If you crave her validation, you will be enslaved by her tests. But if you seize the frame, if you project inevitability, you are no longer tossed by her moods. You become the sovereign around which her very emotions must orbit. Understand this. She cannot escape the frame game. It is not something she consciously designs, but something she instinctively executes. Her pulling away is not random. It is probing. Her silence is not absence. It is pressure. Her laughter is not innocent. It is calibration. Every gesture is a thread in the invisible web of framing. To be blind to this web is to be consumed by it. To see it, to seize it, is to rise above it. This is why the awakened man feels like he has been given a second sight. Suddenly, what once confused him becomes clear. Where once he felt panic, he now feels calm. Where once he collapsed, he now stands taller. He sees the game for what it is, not cruelty, not chaos, but a test of sovereignty. And this test is not a punishment. It is an invitation. Women do not test men because they hate them. They test men because they crave sovereignty. They are drawn to the gravity of a man who cannot be shaken, who cannot be reframed, who cannot be broken by silence or disapproval. Every sigh, every withdrawal, every mocking word is a question, not the question you think, "Do you love me?" but the deeper question, "Are you sovereign enough to rule this reality?" Most men fail, and she loses desire. The few who succeed, she cannot help but respect, desire, even submit to. For the sovereign frame is not just attractive, it is magnetic, inexorable, undeniable. But sovereignty is not arrogance. It is not puffed up posturing, desperate to appear strong. That too is a frame, but a weak one, because it is defined by reaction. The man who boasts of his power is still seeking validation. The man who raises his voice to demand authority is still begging for acknowledgement. Sovereignty is quieter, heavier, immovable. It is the mountain that does not need to announce its height, the fire that does not need to explain its heat. It is presence without defense, action without apology, direction without hesitation. That is the sovereign man. And it is precisely this presence that Machiavelli pointed to when he warned that appearances are more powerful than truth. Because sovereignty is not about convincing her. It is about living in such a way that convincing is unnecessary. So you must ask yourself now, where in your life have you surrendered the frame? Where have you allowed her silence to define your worth? Where have you allowed her teasing to make you shrink? Where have you allowed her withdrawal to dictate your identity? Each of these is a fracture in your sovereignty, and each must be reforged in fire. You do not rebuild sovereignty in theory. You rebuild it in confrontation, in the moments where she tests and you refuse to collapse. Every test passed is another brick in the fortress of your frame. Every collapse resisted is another layer of gravity added to your presence. Until one day you are no longer acting sovereign, you are sovereign. And then the frame game itself shifts. She no longer tests to destroy you. She tests to feel your weight. She no longer withdraws to manipulate you. She withdraws to reassure herself that you are still unshakable. She no longer mocks to cut you down. She mocks because she wants to feel the sting of her attempts dissolve against your calm. The game does not end, but its meaning changes. For now, every test only deepens her recognition of your sovereignty. This is the point Machiavelli leads us to. Sovereignty is not the absence of tests. Sovereignty is the mastery of them. And when you reach this level, you stop fearing her games altogether. You stop panicking when she pulls away. You stop crumbling under her silence. You stop seeking her approval like a starving child. Because you finally understand, the game was never about her. It was always about you. Because you finally understand, the game was never about her. It was always about you. It was always about whether you would awaken to your own sovereignty, whether you would step into the throne room of your own being and declare yourself master, or whether you would spend your life as a subject, tossed by every silence, broken by every withdrawal, enslaved by every frame you failed to seize. This is the brutal revelation Machiavelli leaves us with, that power belongs not to the many, not to the merciful, not to the well-intentioned, but to the few who dare to command appearances and impose reality. And when it comes to women, this law is merciless, for she will never hand you sovereignty. She will test you, pressure you, pull away from you, but she will never crown you. You must crown yourself. Do you see the freedom hidden in this? If she cannot grant you sovereignty, then she also cannot take it away. It does not matter if she mocks, if she doubts, if she walks. If your identity rests on her recognition, you are doomed. But if your identity rests on your declaration, you are untouchable. This is why sovereign men seem rare, magnetic, impossible to ignore, because they do not bend when she withdraws. They do not shatter when she disapproves. They do not beg when she resists. They continue forward with inevitability, and in doing so, They redefine the frame of the relationship itself. Suddenly she is no longer the sovereign, but the subject. She is no longer the one dictating the meaning of events. She is orbiting the meaning he imposes. And paradoxically, it is only in this orbit that she feels safe, desired, ignited. This is the paradox of attraction. She cannot desire you if she rules you. She can only desire you if she feels ruled by your gravity. Not dominated by cruelty, not crushed by tyranny, but enveloped by a sovereignty so undeniable that she can finally rest. Women resist weak men, not because they hate them, but because they cannot relax into them. They cannot surrender to a man who collapses at the slightest test. They cannot give themselves to a man who begs for approval. Their very nature demands sovereignty, and if you cannot embody it, they will continue to test you, to pull away, to mock you, until you either awaken or break. So here is the final edict. You must decide. Will you continue to live inside the invisible cages of frames you never saw being built, forever wondering why women slip through your fingers, forever collapsing under pressures you misinterpret as cruelty? Or will you seize what was always yours? Will you stand as Machiavelli's sovereign man, unshaken by appearance, master of perception, ruler of your own identity? The choice is not theoretical. It is immediate. The next time she pulls away, you will reveal it. The next time she mocks, you will prove it. The next time she withholds, you will either collapse again or you will stand sovereign. There is no middle ground. Either you master the frame, or you will be mastered by it. Either you define reality, or you are defined by it. Either you are sovereign, or you are subject. And the truth is as merciless as it is liberating. The woman cannot break you. Only you can break yourself by surrendering the throne. So rise now. Claim sovereignty. Bend reality. Define the frame. Rule your life with unshakable gravity. And let every silence, every test, every withdrawal become the fire that forges you into the man who cannot be broken. For that is the only kind of man she can love. That is the only kind of man she can respect. That is the only kind of man worthy of himself, the sovereign man. The question is simple. Will it be you?